Vladimir and his 3 dogs were walking in the woods in eastern Russia. They were hunting for food. As the sun is starting to set, he knew he had to find something, or they were not going to eat that night. As they rounded a corner, Vladimir couldn't believe his eyes. There, just off to the side of the trailer, he sees a wild boar. It's dead. He rushes over to it and studies it. He notices it is still bleeding and there is still steam coming off it. He knows this is a fresh kill. He looks around for anyone or an animal who may have made the kill. Although Vladimir knew it was unethical to take someone else's kill, he decided he'll only take what he needs to feed himself and his 2 dogs for 2 days. So, Vladimir cuts a chunk out of the boar and leaves the rest. As Vlad approaches his cabin, he walks to a small shed, unlocks it and puts the meat inside, closes the door, locks it and turns around to walk towards his cabin. As he approaches the door, he notices his 3 dogs didn't follow him. He turns around to see all 3 dogs lined up, side by side, staring into the dark woods. He grabs his torch, walks over towards the dogs and shines the torch towards where the dogs are looking. He can't see anything. "What's out there?" he asks the dogs, but none of them react to his voice. After searching for a couple of minutes, Vlad starts to feel a sudden sense of dread, like something's watching him and the dogs. He knew they all had to get back in the cabin as quickly as possible. Without rushing, he calmly turns around and starts heading towards the front door. "Come on, in," he calls out to the dogs. As he opens the door, he realizes only 2 dogs that enter. He looks back again. He sees Sienna still in the same place, staring into the dark woods, now with the fur on her back standing on its end. Sienna starts to growl. "Sienna, come!" Just then, without warning, Sienna runs in the dark woods, barking frantically. Vlad quickly shuts the door. With rifle in hand, he begins to run towards where Sienna went. He was stopped in his tracks when he heard an almighty roar, loud enough to shake the trees. He can hear Sienna still barking. Then a yelp. Then silence. All is quiet. Vlad didn't know what to do. He also knew it would be a suicide mission to find Sienna. Standing there, looking into the woods, he hears the other dogs barking within the cabin. He decides to go back and stay safe with the remaining dogs. Not long after entering the cabin, resting on his lounge and thinking about what had just happened, he falls asleep. A couple of hours later, Vlad is woken by movement near the shed. So he goes over to one of the holes drilled into the walls of the cabin. They're only big enough for his rifle barrel to fit. He didn't put any windows in when he built it, as he felt his prey would see him. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Although it was dark and he could only see a shadowy figure, he could see an absolutely massive animal on all 4 legs. This thing was as large as a grizzly bear. Now, Vlad knew there were only brown bears in eastern Russia, not grizzlies. He had no idea what he was looking at. He watched it walk around the shed, occasionally looking up at the cabin. Suddenly it rises up on its hind legs and starts to attack the shed, ripping pieces of wood from it, metal, wood flying everywhere, swiping at it without stopping. It was ripping the shed apart. This continued for about 5 minutes without stopping. When the animal had finally stopped and the shed was a pile of rubble, it looked back at the cabin, laid down and began to eat the meat it retrieved from the shed. Vlad was shocked at what he just witnessed. He continued to look out through the hole, not daring to move, just staring at the creature, waiting to see what it would do next. After 2 hours later, Vlad was woken by movement around the cabin. He had fallen asleep. He looks back out the hole and realizes the animal is gone. He rushes to another hole. Nothing. Then another. Nothing. Then another. Nothing. He rushes to the final hole, located in the back of the cabin. As he looks out, he sees 2 red eyes staring back at him. Suddenly, the eyes rush forward and a loud thud is heard from outside the wall Vlad was just looking through. He falls backwards in shock and sits there, literally scared stiff. Finally, he shakes it off and looks back out the hole. Again, he sees the same 2 eyes staring back at him. Instead of rushing towards the cabin, the eyes start to move slowly backwards, away from the cabin. When the creature was in the moonlight, Vlad knew exactly what he was looking at. He had never seen this animal as big as this one. Its eyes had pure hatred in them. Vladimir was face to face with a Siberian tiger. And it wanted Vlad. Vladimir quickly raises his gun, points it through the hole, and fires a single shot at the tiger. He knew he had hit it when he hears the tiger scream in pain. He looks through the hole again. It's gone. Throughout the rest of the night, Vlad went from hole to hole trying to find the tiger. Finally, without sleep, the sun came up. As Vladimir and his two dogs slowly walked out of the cabin, making sure the tiger had gone, he notices a huge tiger footprint in the snow. Then another. Then another. He decides to follow them. It was then he realised, after he had fallen asleep, the tiger was circling the cabin, circling Vladimir. He puts leads on his dog and starts to run towards his nearest neighbour and friend to ask him for his help. He accidentally lets go of one of the leads and the dog runs off into the woods and off the track. Vlad stops. "Boris, stop! Come!" He hears nothing. "Boris, come!" Nothing but silence. Tentatively, Vladimir and his remaining dog continue to run down the path. About an hour later, Vladimir arrives at his neighbour's door. He begins to knock wildly. His friend opens the door. Vlad rushes inside, pushing his friend out of the way, slams the door shut and locks it. Vladimir is so worn out from the run, he almost collapses onto the floor. "What's going on?" his friend asks. "I need your help," Vlad says. "Sure, anything." Vladimir tells his friend everything that had happened the night before. When he had finished, he asked his friend to help hunt the tiger and kill it. "Will you help me?" Vlad begs. His friend just stands there, mouth slightly ajar and horrified by what he had just heard. Finally, he answers, "No." He then takes a couple of steps backwards, away from Vlad. "What? Please!" "No. You have been marked by a Siberian tiger. The only thing you can do is get the hell away from it, as far as you can. It will not stop until you, or it, is dead." Disappointed, but knowing he can't force his friend to help, Vlad just runs out the door. All day, Vladimir goes from house to house asking people for help, but every time he asked someone, he got the same response as his friend gave him. "No, you have been marked by a Siberian tiger." Defeated, and knowing he had to get back to his cabin before the sun fell, Vladimir started the long trek home. When he finally approached the cabin, he notices something is wrong. Everything was a mess. He had a bathtub outside. It was torn to pieces. The outside lounge ripped to shreds. The shed that was a pile of rubble, pieces of it were all over the place. Suddenly he hears a whimper coming from his dog. Not the one beside him, but Boris. It's coming from inside the cabin. He lets go of the lead from the remaining dog and runs inside, searching frantically for Boris. He hears the whimper. It was coming from under a pile of rubbish on the floor. He runs to Boris, cradles his head, and then stops. He slowly raises his head. He realizes what is happening. He had just walked into a trap.